Welcome to the Genesis of the Doctor podcast, where we're taking a journey to the time and space of the history of Doctor Who. I'm Tris,
I'm Joy.
and for today's episode, we're focusing on the first serial of season. I keep always mix up series and seasons. I don't know why. I do it every time. I always catch myself. Not that time. Season 5 of Classic Who, The Tomb of the Cybermen, which is really cool to be the start of the season.
Yeah.
And on the non-classic side, we're also talking about the new Christmas special, Joy to the World. So there's kind of a lot to go over here, actually.
Yep.
But we're going to start on the classic side. We're going to go with Tomb of the Cybermen.
Yep.
So, out of curiosity, have you ever seen this episode before watching it for the podcast here?
No, I haven't.
Okay, because this is one of the few episodes of like random watches of classic Doctor Who here and there over the year, over the years growing up. This is one of the few classic episodes I watched when I was a lot younger, so I kind of knew like the gist of the story, the general flow of it going in. But I think one thing that really threw me off with this story, like really paying attention this time, is how many characters there are really early on and how quickly it jumps down to like 5.
Yeah.
At most.
They gotta start killing people just to get the threat in there.
It's like they brought in a bunch of people, said, wait. Our sets are not big enough for this many people. So they lose like 5 of them to go repair the ship, occasionally bringing 2 of them back from there, and then they start killing off more people because they just can't fit everyone at the same time.
Yeah.
I know that's probably not it, but that's kind of what it felt like at times.
I think it really works for this story though, because it's just like a mummy movie essentially, and you tend to have just people that just die immediately in those.
Yeah, 100%. No, comparison to the Mummy is really good. I mean, it is the tomb of the Cybermen after all, but
Yeah.
it's the whole archaeological expedition. I guess maybe this is where the Doctor eventually gets his hate of archaeologists.
Yeah, I found it fascinating, just like how different this story is from like any other Cyberman story, where it's it's a mummy movie. It's they break into a tomb and they unleash an ancient evil.
Yep. And it's fascinating too, because all the Cybermen really want in this case is to come back and survive.
Yeah.
As they're not looking to, we're gonna relaunch our empire, we're gonna conquer everything. Some people want to conquer everything, but realistically, the Cybermen are bent on specifically, we must survive. We will survive. And it's
Yeah.
a very different perspective than what we've typically gotten from the Cybermen thus far. In all the previous stories, it does seem a little bit more conquest-like.
Yeah. And then we do also have a conversion, sort of, in this.
We do, yeah, we do kind of have a conversion. Not too different from, like, the Dalek conversions, the Dalek mind control that we got in the previous serial.
Yeah.
No, I know. I guess there is a little bit of like a physical conversion to it, though, isn't there? Cause
Yeah, his arm is changed.
Yeah, Toberman's whole arm got changed. So yeah, okay. I guess that is technically kind of the first of those that we really got, where we're seeing physical changes start coming about too.
Yeah. I found the scene so funny when like Toberman's receiving his orders and they just have like the weird lines. It was such a funny effect.
It is a pretty funny effect, just a little, like, electrical signals being sent between the two of them. I find it most funny that these villains didn't think anything was up with him.
Yeah.
Like,
They clearly...
already kind of weird that he's just their servant and he barely says lines. But besides that point, the fact that he's clearly acting even weirder than usual, but they're too self-absorbed to even notice that.
Yeah. I guess they just never pay attention to him.
Which I think is telling.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Toberman's
very
definitely
strong.
the same as the guy in the previous episode, where it's just like,
Yep.
not the best representation of people of color, for sure.
Yeah, unfortunately. Like, I like how they made it like a really good plot point of like how he's strong. Like they had him
Yeah.
do things only he can do. It's why he ended up becoming a good asset to the Cybermen, but then he was able to uh, kind of break out of control of the Cybermen, and then it ended up being him that saved them all from it. So I do like that he played a role, a consistent role, but I do still wish it was handled better.
Yeah. And then they just leave his body at the doors at the end, which is
Which
so
I
weird.
didn't understand.
Yeah, because like they took the other people's dead bodies, but they just left his. So
Well,
it's there in the credits.
they took the others that weren't traitors. The other
Yeah.
traitors they left behind.
Yeah.
But actually, let's talk about those traitors. So these other two villains, their goal is it's so going into this, my like vague recollection of this, I thought it was they were people that believed in the Cybermen and wanted to save them and let them rule because they believed they were better. No, they thought for some reason that they could control the Cybermen, and this is once again a story of the Cybermen are known. This is not a first encounter with the Cybermen ever in history kind of ideal. This is they're known throughout history. This is literally an archaeological team going to find Cybermen. They were not accidentally stumbled upon. So there should be all these stories and legends and like recorded history of what the Cybermen are and what they can do. I don't understand why two rich pricks think they can just control that.
Yeah. I found it so funny that the guy's like, with the Cyberman's power and with my mind, we will rule the world. And like, the Cybermen already have better minds than you do. They don't need
Yeah,
your
I
mind.
don't understand where that came from. Like, what made him think he was smarter than the Cybermen after
Yeah.
like everything that's happened, everything they've gone through? Like, I don't see where that logic came from. Yes, I understand he was a man of logic, but he was lacking quite a bit of it throughout.
Yeah.
I think the Doctor even kind of like poked fun at that at times. He was like, "Oh yes, you're a man of logic, huh?"
Yeah, they're basically just like cult members, essentially.
It
It's
really
it's a
does
cult
seem
of
like that.
logic.
A cult of logic. Wow. When you put it like that, that's kind of crazy. But that literally is what it was, wasn't it?
Yep. So I guess it may make sense that, you know, ego gets in the way when you're part of a cult.
Yeah, probably. But it's kind of funny because he never seemed like the leader of the cult. He seemed like he was just one of many of them. So the fact that like oh, I'm gonna rule. I'm gonna be the one with all the power. Aren't you like part of a group?
Yeah, it's the
Like,
Brotherhood of Logicians or something, I think was the name.
yeah,
But yeah, that guy, he definitely had big ego. And uh, the woman he was
it
with
was his downfall.
kind of fed into his ego to manipulate him.
Constantly. I couldn't even tell what her main goal was because it felt like they were setting up that they were eventually going to be at odds with each other. Of
Yeah,
she wanting to usurp him for the power, but it never actually ended up playing out.
yeah. And then her role was basically just to die so Tobran would get angry.
Yeah, that's what it ended up being. I mean, she definitely was at constant odds with Victoria.
Yeah,
Like she was kind of the enemy to Victoria through this episode. Which let's talk a bit about her because this is her first real adventure. Yes, she was there throughout not the power, the evil of the Daleks, but this is really the first time she's been in the TARDIS. This is the first time she's on an adventure. She talks about how her dress is too short because she's from an older time.
yeah,
Um, and I really do like how and there's moments with her that definitely feel like, yep, she's from an older time. She wouldn't get this. And Jamie just kind of says something offhandedly, like, I don't get it either, but let's go along with it. So clearly he's getting used to it. And I really liked that dynamic, actually.
yeah.
Um, but I was a little disappointed that she didn't question more.
Yeah. She just kind of tried to go with the flow with it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I did like that they had a lot for her to do, which is nice.
They did. Yeah.
Like, clearly when they had four companions, they were struggling to give everybody something to do. But then they managed to do it better here, I find.
Yeah. I think they did a really good job here, balancing things out and the way they have her do things. Even if it's in part because, oh, you stay behind. Well, by staying behind, it at least gave her something to do.
Yeah. She had to stay behind to
Um,
keep an eye on the other person. But then she was
yeah,
drugged and fell
exactly.
asleep.
And she's new to all this, so it's not her fault.
Yeah.
But there was a really, really good scene with her and the doctor when like everyone's
Yeah.
sleeping before the Cybermats came out. Um, and she's talking with the doctor about missing her father, and you're kind of like dealing with grief basically. And I thought that was such a good little speech from the doctor,
Yeah.
and such a great little interaction between the two of them that already shows the dynamic between this doctor and companion is already a really strong one.
Yeah. It's definitely a very good scene there and a good speech.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell the doctor's basically like adopted her. Thinks of her
Yeah.
as his kid,
I mean,
basically.
I imagine he feels very guilty for what happened and how she was caught up in all of it.
Yeah. And he talks about how your memories of your dead family is not always going to be bad.
Yep.
Eventually, you'll remember them fondly.
Yep. And you also won't always be dwelling on the grief. Is also it. It's you'll remember when you need to, but as he also mentioned, of the only people in the universe that get to do this kind of thing. There's a lot of things going on that you can't always be thinking about. That there's plenty of other things to actively be thinking about too.
Yeah. I guess that implies, though, that the doctor's family is dead. And, like, is Susan the only surviving one, according to the lore at this point?
Possibly, possibly. Although it also seems like, from the doctor's perspective, he chose, having chosen to leave her behind. He's not dwelling on where she is, what's happening with her.
Yeah. He could be talking about Susan, or he could be talking about, like, Susan's parents and why they weren't there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's hard to say. It's hard to say, but I think this is the first time in a while we've had um, a young woman companion that's young enough to fill that kind of Susan role. That I think actively feels like he's being parental to her, and we haven't had that with the second Doctor yet. So we're really getting like a good a good new dynamic for this Doctor, even if it's a familiar one from the first Doctor.
Yeah. And I feel this is more, like, parental than grandfatherly, so it's slightly
Yep.
different.
Yep. Although I do love how she keeps calling him old and ancient.
Yeah. We got the doctor's age for the first time, and he was 450
We
years
did.
old.
Yeah, which is quite young for the Doctor, all things considered.
Yeah. I think the only other hint at his age was that, like, his diary was like a 100-year diary or something
Mm-hmm.
in Power of the Daleks. But then, yeah, I liked how she was like, well, you're 450 years old. You need to sleep more than I do.
She's like, "Wow, shouldn't you be in bed, like bedridden and resting like most of the time?" And he's like,
Yeah.
"No, I'm pretty active."
This body's only
No,
like
it's funny.
a few days old. Like maybe a couple months.
Yeah, basically. But I really loved that little scene the two of them had because I think it was a really strong moment for this Doctor
Yeah.
and how he handles his companions.
And I liked the scene where Jamie's with like the other guy that died, and he's like being explained how all this stuff works, and he's just like, oh yeah, that. I understand what you're talking about.
Jamie's just like, "Yeah, I give up. I'm not even gonna pretend to understand. Just, yep, all right,
Yep.
sure."
And then he finds a caterpillar moments later.
That's a if he really thought that's a caterpillar, that's a big caterpillar.
Yeah.
It's a good thing that Cybermen wasn't active, but dang.
Oh, and there was the other good scene where the doctor says, like, if you're scared, you can leave now. And Jamie starts to leave it. And he says, no, not you,
Yeah.
not you, Jamie.
No, not Jamie, not you. Yeah, that was honestly really funny. He's like encouraging everyone else to leave, if they so want to. And nope, not you,
Yeah.
Jamie.
And then the complete metal breakdown, and Jamie's offended by it.
Oh, that was so funny. The little like pun, and then he even comments like, "Oh, all right, Jamie." Like just a little like banter between the two of them. That felt very much like the actors are trying to one up each other with like good puns and funny moments, but staying in character when they address it.
Yeah.
That felt ad libbed.
And there was also the hand holding between the second
Oh,
Doctor and
the
Jamie.
hand holding is so iconic of a moment.
And apparently, the actors came up with that, and they just did it without telling the director, and they couldn't just cut it. So that's why it's
Well,
there.
but it's also just a really funny thing that shows their dynamic. I remember
Yeah.
back in August, I went to Long Island Who, and Fraser was there. You know, the actor for Jamie was there, and he talked about his time as Jamie Crimmins and everything. And that scene was one of the like highlights that he talked about of like just iconic moments they had, and the hint at the kind of relationship that the Doctor and Jamie have. Oh, you know, could they be gay? Could they definitely be more than just straight? And his answer was basically, I mean, of course, because straight people wouldn't just do that. But
Yeah.
that's up to your interpretation.
Yeah.
But they definitely tried to have fun with it all. And it's just very silly.
Yeah. There were very good moments with all the companions in this, though, I would say.
Yeah. I think if there was anyone that I felt was lacking in presence, it's the expedition leader. I think Perry was his name.
Yeah.
I think he really only had importance in like 3 scenes. And otherwise, it was very much the Doctor versus the villains, or you know, the people betraying the expedition, the ones who funded it. The leader of the expedition didn't really do that much, all things considered.
Yeah. And there's a funny story from behind the scenes that
Mm-hmm.
the woman that played, like, the evil woman who played Kaftan,
Yeah,
she's
yeah,
married to
Captain.
Peter Bryant, and Fraser Hines was flirting with her, not knowing she was married on the set. And Peter Bryant is the current producer, so that was his boss. His boss's wife he was flirting with.
God, that's funny. I'm sure there's a really funny story on Fraser's end about that, but
Yeah.
oh man.
So yeah,
Any other fun behind the scenes stuff with it?
just that Peter Bryant is the producer for this serial, which is just basically a test to see if he would be a good replacement for Innes Lloyd. So Innes Lloyd's going to come back and do a couple more, and then Peter Bryant will take on later on down the line.
Okay.
And Victor Pemberton is the script editor, but he doesn't really like being the script editor, so he doesn't stay in that role. But he will
Okay.
write a story later this season.
Ooh.
He was basically just picked as the script editor because Peter Bryant was supposed to be the script editor, and then so they just hastily needed one because he's not going to be able to do that here as well.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And then apparently the Cybermats, there was like some of them were remote control, some of them were like pull back and go, others were just on a string and pulled and stuff like that. So they did a lot of stuff with them.
Speaking of strings, there was that one moment where the Cyberman picks up Toberman, and you can actually see like the hook and wire like on him, like on his back,
Yeah,
for when he gets thrown, like rather obviously. And I was kind of surprised because of how well they've been hiding those thus far.
yeah. And I like when the cyber controller is picked up, you can very obviously tell it's just a dummy.
Yeah, it's like he walks off screen to pick up the dummy instead.
Yeah.
But kind of important point that we haven't actively talked too much about. How do we feel about the Cybermen themselves here?
I feel like they kind of weren't even really the threat of this story.
Mm-hmm.
Like they
They were
didn't.
the catalyst, but they weren't the act. Well, they were threatening. It's
Yeah.
like a Walking Dead episode, right? Where like the walkers, the zombies are there, but it's the other people that are actually the problem.
Yeah. Like I said though, I think it's like just a fascinating, different kind of Cyberman story that I quite enjoyed it.
Considering the other two stories that we had thus far, it's the 10th planet and the moon base are kind of the same story or very similar.
Yeah,
It is nice having one that's pretty different. Um,
definitely.
and I really do think um, this is the point where it feels obvious that they want the Cybermen to be the new Daleks. They want them to be what's like really scary,
Yeah,
and I think this episode did a really good job with it because as we mentioned earlier, the idea of like the story of mummies and curses and all that being adapted into a Cyberman story, those are typically pretty scary, and it played into it really well here, I think, because it made the Cybermen feel even more like this threat that is still kind of always around if you know where to look or if you're not careful.
yeah,
They could always come back, kind of thing.
yeah. Because the plots that like Cybermen haven't been around for hundreds of years, and then
Yep.
they just unearth them.
Yep. And they technically weren't even destroyed in this. They were just
Yeah,
sealed in. Like theoretically, anyone could find a way in and still, you know, free them.
yeah. And maybe they did because like obviously Cybermen come back in the future.
Yep. Obviously, there still could be any other outposts and any other places for the Cybermen, but this is one of the other known ones, at least.
Yeah. And they also have that little comment that like this is their secondary planet because
Mm-hmm.
obviously originally they were from Mondas and then
Yep.
Telos was their secondary planet.
Yep.
And they recognize the Doctor and they say they know him.
Yep. And then that's when he even directly references like the moon base. He's like, "Oh yeah, the lunar surface."
Yeah.
So he's known, and he's making a name for himself. His enemies are recognizing him.
Yep. I just loved how at the start as well. It's just like as soon as they mention the Cybermen, the Doctor's like, "Nope, we can't leave. We gotta
Yep.
stay here." I love that he
Yep.
just does that all the time.
He definitely has a better sense of duty. I guess he feels it's his duty to stop them. Even more than the first Doctor had, because a lot of times for the first Doctor, it wasn't until he was involved. He eventually, like in his later seasons, started getting that drive to be the hero, even though he didn't realize it. Um, the second Doctor is really the one that we're seeing actively be that. He's actively filling that role. It's if there's evil around, we have to make sure we stop it,
Yeah.
even if we're not involved yet. If there's a hint of evil around, we must deal with it.
And that will sort of come back to bite him because obviously we know the Time Lords were not happy about that.
Yep, yep. That does kind of break Time Lord rules of non-interference. That's for sure.
Yep. I found that the Cyberman like breaking through the plastic wrap scene so funny though.
Oh, I kind of love that though, in terms of like the effects that they use for it and like the
Yeah,
way they played it out. I thought that was really like neat. But I do love how for freezing them, they just play those clips in reverse.
yeah. They just reverse it later. And I liked the theme music for them in this story. I think it might just
Yeah.
be like public domain music or something is what it was, but it works
Oh,
very
really?
well. I really
Because
liked it.
we've had that like Cybermen theme in the other stories, but like this is the one where it felt more dramatic, I guess, because it's as they're breaking out and it's not overused that much.
Yeah. I really liked the music in this one though.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty good.
And apparently the scene where the Cyberman chess piece was foaming over at the end got complaints that it
Yeah.
was too brutal. I think they had to someone went on the news and something and commented on it. Said like, "No, it's not that bad. It's just foam."
Yeah, really. It's not that bad. It's not like it's bloody, but I guess that's fair.
For 1960 sensibilities, it's a bit different.
Yeah. Different time means the way they play it out is different. And they really did linger on that for a while, too.
Yeah.
It's not like they showed it starting to bubble over and then they showed reactions. Like, they kept going back to it and staying on it for a bit as it
Yeah.
was really foaming.
And this is one of Matt Smith's favorite Doctor Who stories.
Oh. That's interesting.
I think I agree with him. I think it's a very good one.
It's a really solid Cybermen story. It's one of my favorites. So
Yeah.
I'm really happy that we got to go through it. And I really like getting to look at it again now, like all these years later, and really see how like this one really kind of sets up a different perspective of the threat of the Cybermen, since it's the first one that's more about stopping their return,
Yeah.
which becomes a running thing in Doctor Who very much, even through modern era. But because it's like the threat of the return of the Daleks versus the threat of the return of the Cybermen are very different.
Yeah. The Cybermen can easily just come back if they're just one of them and they just convert other people.
Yep. All it takes is one.
Yep. Although I guess all it takes is one Dalek to just kill everybody. So
Yeah. But it's different. All it takes is one Dalek to be a killing machine. All it takes is one Cyberman to form an army.
yeah.
All right.
That's
I
basically
think that's
that's all I have written about that story.
Yeah, I think that's all we got to say on Tomb of the Cybermen. So we're gonna jump out of the classics and into the modern because, as of recording, it's a little after Christmas. So we get to go over our thoughts on the latest Christmas special in modern Doctor Who, "Joy to the World" by Stephen Moffat. So initial impressions. How did you feel like after this episode ended?
I found it very odd just to me that like typically when I watch Stephen Moffat episodes, I like the plot of the episode, but I'm not a big fan of like the Doctor's interpersonal relationships with people. Whereas in this
Right.
story, I had the exact opposite impression that I thought the plot didn't
Okay.
really make much sense, but the whole thing with Anita was the highlight of the episode. And like his
Everything
friendship
with
with Anita
Anita.
there was just amazing.
That was so good, so well done, and in like what, like a 10-minute scene? I think it
Yeah,
was
it
literally
was
like
about
a
10
ten
minutes.
minute. It was about 10 minutes, and in that 10 minutes, you care for Anita like a companion,
Yeah,
like, and the relationship she has with the Doctor. They did a really good job with that.
yeah. He was talking about her in like one of the previews, and he said that like originally that role was only a few lines, and then they just really liked the role, so they just expanded it. And I'm
Hmm.
glad they did because it was very good.
It added a lot, right? Because it also added a lot for who this Doctor is.
Yeah,
Because this idea of the Doctor stuck on Earth, blending in, stuck in a single time period, we've had that with a few Doctors, but it's not very often that we really get to see it. I mean, look at the 11th Doctor in The Power of Three, where he's just like ADHD. He just can't sit still the whole time. That's
yeah,
basically the whole purpose of his time stuck on Earth story. Whereas here, they really use it to show how, I guess, almost kind of magical he is. He's got a bit of that Disney magic because of the Disney
yeah,
money. um, it's the fact that he brings joy to people. He changes their lives for what he believes is the better, and even just staying in one place, just his presence lights up a room, kind of thing.
yeah. I love the little bit where he's handed a plunger and he's like, "Is this armed?" That was a very good joke.
That was a good joke. I also love that he's telling Anita about the Weeping Angels. It's like
Yeah,
Stephen Moffat poking fun at himself for one of his earlier stories. But it makes me wonder just how much of his adventures he told her about.
yeah. Especially because like when he leaves, she's hesitant to like let him leave, so it kind of implies that she doesn't fully know everything.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, she doesn't fully know everything, but I have to imagine like I want a story like a short trips audio story or something that's there's a threat in London on Earth while he's there for that 1 year. And he's there, so
Yeah,
he and Anita go deal with it for like one story. And it's not like this big, massive threat, but it's enough that it springs him into action with this temporary companion. Because
yeah.
I think that'd be pretty cool.
Not to be mean, but I feel like his friendship with Anita is better than his friendship with Ruby.
I
Like,
think it's because we got to see it develop.
Yeah.
We got to see why she felt so strongly for him and why he felt so attached to her. Like, we got to see that development. Whereas with Ruby,
They just kind of
we
skipped
saw
it.
them meet. Yeah, exactly. We saw them meet and we saw the potential, and then they skipped to now they're besties. So
Yeah.
we didn't really get the development of reaching that point. So it makes what he had with Anita feel more special because we saw basically every step of it throughout a year.
Yeah. I just love the montage of him just like, the microwave is bigger on the inside now, and then the car is blue, and
The car
takes
is
you where you need to
blue.
go.
It's so funny. It's so funny.
Yeah.
Like he's so quirky, but that's actually one thing I want to mention with this episode of as a good kind of transition. The Doctor himself, I think, really shined in this episode.
Yeah, he definitely
Um,
did.
I've I've always felt that Stephen Moffat's really good at writing like the personality of the Doctor and really establishing like the thought process and the minute decision making that the Doctor has. I think with like Matt Smith and Capaldi, I really loved seeing how those went. And in Boom and Joy to the World, I think you also see it shine really strongly here,
Yeah.
because you see him go through like waves of emotions, and I think the 15th Doctor really shined here. And I think if that's also in part because he's now filmed the whole season. I think he's just comfortable in the role now too. And I
Yeah.
think you really got to see it here. Um, Nothing here felt new and experimental for his Doctor. It felt very comfortable in terms of like he's locked into the role now. He's done it for a whole season. He knows what he's doing, but we get a good understanding of his character, so now we can see him push a little bit. We see him, we see a bit of like the rudeness of Capaldi kind of come out.
Yeah.
When he's forcing Joy to be angry to snap her out of it, and we've not really had that. The closest to that with this Doctor we've had was in Boom, where he's
Definitely
really
frustrated.
fighting for his life. Yeah, definitely frustrated, but that's more out of his own frustration as
Yeah.
opposed to a rude way to help someone here.
Yeah. And I also loved the
Yeah.
scene, like how they redo the scene of the Doctor meeting himself, and then you can see like
Yes.
the difference of like, the second time we see the Doctor looking at the chair,
Yep.
and we know that's what he's thinking about.
Yep. Like the shift in perspective is
Yeah.
really well done there. And I think this episode does such a good job of giving us a look into like the Doctor's head.
Yeah.
Which Stephen Moffat really likes to do. Stephen Moffat really likes to personify the Doctor and really give us a look inside his head. Not that the others don't, but there's something specific about the way Stephen Moffat does it. He always wants you thinking about that.
Yeah.
His two episodes from this era already kind of really show off that idea, right?
Yeah. But the Time Hotel was kind of funny though to think about that. Like
Mm-hmm.
they mentioned that you can go to the Fall of Troy, and like, I mean, the Doctor was there.
Yeah.
They should recognize the TARDIS if they have a room in the Fall of Troy. They should know
That's
what that
true.
looks like.
Although, if they don't actively leave the room that much, so
Yeah, I
that's one
guess.
thing I was thinking about on my second rewatch of this. It's like, hold on, if the rooms are only available when there are not inhabitants from that era, how does that get sorted in the actual hotel? Because presumably these are all going to like actual hotels or actual locations. How do you explain that? Like, oh, this did they just like flick a switch and okay, someone checked out of this hotel room. Oh, it's booked again. I'm not gonna think about that one.
Yeah, well,
Like,
I feel like with Anita at the beginning there, you kind of get the impression that like maybe there's like some subtle brainwashing or something, because like she's not surprised to see a lizard man just appearing in the room. So it's like she sort of like was taught like not to question it, I guess.
that's true. That's true.
So maybe
It's like a case of
they
almost like a
subtly
perception
brainwash
filter.
like the managers of the hotels or something.
Yeah, it's like that. There's something like a perception filter or some sort of like brainwashing that goes into the staff of the hotels to not question it, basically.
Yeah.
Or maybe not necessarily the staff of the hotels, but anyone that would be involved in that location, because some of them definitely aren't even hotels like
Yeah.
the Orient Express or
The Everest
the
base.
yeah, thank you. I was like the tent on Everest. Um, and there's definitely cases where they're not exactly hotels, and I imagine those time zones always change because they can't just repeat like the same day, for example. And they even said, oh, their theme this time is Christmas everywhere. So
Yeah.
I guess it can't always be the same day because obviously you can't have two people stay in the room at the same time, paradoxes and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I think the time hotel as a concept was really cool, and I really liked the way it was executed in terms of all the different rooms that we got to see and all the different set pieces they made for it. And the Doctor having fun exploring it too.
Yeah. I also liked the presidential assassination special where you could
Oh yeah, your favorite assassination.
yeah, you could
God.
get one for the Lincoln assassination and one for the Kennedy assassination.
That's so funny.
But yeah, I feel like Joy's character is kind of the one that doesn't work as well as I wish it kind of did.
Yeah,
'Cause, like-
I wanted to make sure we talk about her because obviously her name is in the episode and
Yeah.
it's you obviously. So
I feel like
let's talk about you in this episode.
yeah, like she's like brainwashed for half of her screen time, and it's just like you don't really get the best feeling of who she is as a character for the most part because like she's not herself for half of the time she's there.
Mm-hmm.
Then obviously we have a 10-minute interlude where she's not there, and like I like that 10-minute
Yeah.
interlude, but the title character's
So-
just gone.
It's weird because of how much she was marketed to be like the companion of the episode, and it really
Yeah.
doesn't feel like she's there as the companion for most of it.
Yeah, like she's
Like even with the 10-minute interlude, like the Doctor's trying to save her through the brainwashing, and the only real moments we have of her is when he wakes her up and she's angry and she's like finally like letting loose that like pent up frustration and rage that she's had,
yeah.
and when she says goodbye to him.
Yeah, pretty much. It just feels weird that like she was so heavily marketed, and then she's less a one-off companion and more just like the threat of the episode because she's brainwashed by the threat the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I did like
It's odd.
the very visceral moment of she's frustrated that her mom died in the hospital during COVID,
Yeah.
and then she
Yeah.
complained specifically about what British politicians were doing at the time, which was
Yeah.
throwing parties.
Yep. Yep. No, I think that's really. I think that's really well done because I think, I mean, everyone in the world has frustrations from that era,
Yeah.
right? From especially like the heavy lockdowns from that era and everything, and I think for a show that's so heavily about people and emotions and time travel, I think it's really good to actually tell a story with that.
Yeah. And it's a story that many people went through, was losing family in the hospital and they couldn't visit them.
And it makes her a very relatable character to a lot of viewers because even though we don't get so much adventure with her, we really get this story of loneliness and guilt, even though there's nothing to be guilty over, but it's just this horrible feeling that she sits with, and the forced smile and the the pot boiling over kind of thing in her.
Yeah.
That's really relatable to a lot of people, and I think that's done really, really well, and finally getting to let that out and what that means to her to get to let that out and be seen and heard through all of that. And even though that doesn't solve it, obviously, it really kind of helps you take a step back and examine yourself and how you've been living since. It's steps to recovery, basically. It's steps to your own self-healing.
Yeah.
And then, of course... Yeah, go ahead.
I like how Stephen Moffat comes back and he's just like, in this episode, we're going to talk about how capitalism is bad. In this episode, we're going to talk about how the government sucks.
Yep.
It's like,
Yep. Good old Stephen Moffat.
got good stories to tell.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell
But
he's spent the last few years having frustrations and just immediately taking those out when he's given the opportunity.
and I applaud it.
Yep.
Because like this is a story that I think I actually really enjoyed even more on the second time, like actually rewatching it. Because then you really get to pay attention to all the subtleties and everything, like even more so, like once you know where it's going. And
Yeah.
the subtleties in Joy's character, I think, were so well done.
Yeah.
I think like just watching her slowly break out as the doctor makes her more angry, and she really lets that out. That was so well done, and everything about like her farewell speech, albeit kind of cheesy, was also I think really well performed, and I think her perspective. The shift in her perspective because of it, I think, is also really fascinating. My only real gripe with it is the fact that I still feel, even after a second rewatch, that the way she says goodbye to the doctor, the only thing she has to go off of is that he saw the real her,
Yeah.
and they knew each other for what 5 minutes in her perspective.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Because in her perspective, he steps into her hotel room. She gets locked to the briefcase. They walk through the hotel together. They stand in another room for a few minutes, have an argument. They walk across the hall to another room. He leaves her alone, and then they're standing on a cliff as she says goodbye. That's,
Yeah.
for her perspective, maybe, I don't know, 15 minutes.
Yeah. And I felt the idea of the starseed actually isn't bad. Just I don't get it. Like they spend most of the
So,
episode building up how terrible it is, and then it's just it's not actually a problem. Don't worry about it.
so I think what it was there is a case of Vilengard was doing it illegally. Vilengard was sacrificing a planet and probably more to grow a star, to make a star just right there,
Yeah.
um, which is awful. But the amount of what they didn't account for is the amount of time spent growing and the amount of consciousnesses conscious whatever the plural of consciousness is thrown into there. They decided to think, no, we're not going to sacrifice everything. This sucks, actually, and we're going to take it for ourselves, and we're going to it's almost like life choosing itself as opposed to corporations doing it.
Yeah.
And it's why they gave themselves the opportunity to go off and to their own to somewhere safe. And it's the story of, as something I did not get this at first. I got this on the rewatch. It is the story of like the creation of the star that led uh religious figures to that one place at the very end.
Yeah. Jerusalem.
Yes, to Jerusalem.
The birth of Jesus is what it was.
Yes, the birth. Yes. That's what that was. I first time through did not catch that.
Yeah.
I had to look it up after, and then I'm not well versed in all
Yeah.
that. But I think it's interesting too the way it tells that story, because it's a case of, okay, whether it's religious or not, something did actually happen there, and the science fiction side of it is potentially what allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
Because a star was made right there, and it shone very brightly during that moment.
And just
But yeah.
personally, I enjoyed when the doctor turned to the camera and said, "Oh, you're Joy." True. That's me. I love that.
That was quite funny, and then him yelling "joy to the world."
Yeah.
It's cheesy. It really is cheesy, and then you see where it actually was, and it's like, oh, okay. But I do still think it was overall well done. I just wish we got to learn more about Joy's character beyond the fact that she's been quietly suffering, not so quietly suffering, the past like 4 years.
She
5
has to
years,
come
something
back
like
for
that.
Big Finish and just oh, this actually isn't the first time she met the doctor. Don't worry about it.
Man, I don't know. Like I think. Okay, I will also say I think the scene where we actually see the scene with her mother was also very sad.
Yeah.
That was also very well done. And I've seen some people online complaining that, like, oh, does this mean she killed her mother? No, that's not what that means. It's a case of her mother dying means they get to see each other again because she's also gone. It's, the whole thing of your soul going out to the stars and,
Yeah.
the afterlife and all that.
Sh-
It was a case of Joy. At that moment, Joy, even though she was talking to Joy on the screen, because in the actual time Joy was there, Joy was also gone, so they were joining each other basically.
yeah.
And there was definitely something beautiful to it, though. I do think it was played out very sad either way.
Yeah. This is like the fifth time that Stephen Moffat has created the afterlife in Doctor Who.
Yeah,
He just keeps doing that.
he keeps doing that, and it's different each time because who knows?
Yeah. Also, a fun little note here is that, at least according to TARDIS Wiki's counting, there were 156 Classic Who stories, and Joy to the World is the 156th Modern Who story. So Modern Who is now officially like half of Doctor Who. So that's counting
Wow.
like, one serial is one story, and then obviously in Modern
Yeah,
Who, they're normally one-off episodes.
I see. Okay.
So like
Wow, that's interesting,
in
actually.
Modern Who, it's like counting like the two-parters as one story and stuff like that. It's
Mm-hmm.
156 in Modern Who, and the Eighth Doctor's movie was 156th Doctor Who story. So
Well, that kind of makes sense too, because when you look at how long Classic Who actually ran,
yeah,
yeah, the movie came significantly after it had been canceled, technically.
yeah,
So it's not the same amount of time, but it's a similar amount of time.
yeah. And then just Modern Who just does one-off episodes mostly, so they go through
Yeah.
different stories faster.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fascinating just that
Overall,
we're now officially hitting the point where Modern Who is going to have more stories than Classic Who did.
that's wild. What a long show.
Yep.
And here we are. But overall, I really liked Story of the World, and I think I liked it even better on a rewatch.
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful story. Like it's a beautiful character study. It's a beautiful like character story about loneliness and guilt. And while we've had that before, we've had Donna telling the doctor after her wedding, you need someone to stop you. We've had uh we had one of Matt Smith's Christmas specials, the where it was basically Narnia, being
Yeah.
told, you shouldn't be alone at Christmas, and he goes back to Amy and Rory, the idea of going and finding friends again, and we had this message given to the doctor multiple times, and I don't think that's a bad thing because the doctor's so old, has been on for so long, he needs that reminder, and I think the fact that it's always a different face getting that reminder too is helpful because each time it's kind of a different person. So
Yeah. And I feel like he definitely took losing Ruby better than other doctors take losing companions.
yes,
The other ones
yes,
get
and
depressed or Time Lord Victorious and stuff when they're on their own, and this doctor's just
yeah,
a bit sad.
he's lonely is
Yeah.
largely it, and he even kind of had a solution for that with Anita, and
Yeah.
felt bad that she was going to be lonely afterwards too. But even that little like 10-minute segment was such a good little story about loneliness.
Yeah.
And I think in the context at the time of this coming out, I mean, they had the whole little like pandemic mention in there and why Joy's mother died. Like I think yeah, loneliness is like a big problem right now, and I think this episode really wanted to play with that idea.
Yeah. And there was also if you paid attention to like the newspaper he had at the beginning of the story,
Yep.
it was also shown off in like one of the promotional images where it kind of says that prisoner zero was found innocent, which was just funny.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of weird little references
Yeah.
in that newspaper. That's the biggest one. I genuinely don't understand how that came to pass, but I think that's just Moffat wanted to reference his other episodes and have
Yeah.
some fun there.
There was also a thing about like the duck pond in that same episode, like the ducks
Oh
disappeared,
yeah.
and there was like, there's like some duck pond story on that newspaper. You don't get a good look at it in the episode, but it was on like a magazine recently, and then it's the same newspaper, so you can there
Yeah,
is a
they
better
also
look at
posted
on
on
of
social
it out
media.
there.
Yeah, they had also posted it on social media. There's like the prisoners they were found innocent, the duck pond mystery solved,
Yeah,
and it's like the whole like front page. But there's also like a bunch of other little things in here,
I
which
also
is
love.
it's also called the timey wimey, by the way.
Yeah, I loved the TARDIS props that the Doctor finds. He's just like, oh, they're just all there on like eBay. There's just a lot of them.
Yeah, it's like, oh, there's a lot of them online. I love that little fandom shout out.
Yeah, and then if you own one of those, you can say like, hey, the Doctor owns the same one I do.
Yeah.
And then
It makes
he,
me wonder if they actually bought those from like fan creators, like to just like
yeah,
as like feature them as props. Because I think that would have been really cute to do.
yeah, and then he leaves the one for Anita. At least that's the implication. They don't actually see what's in the present, but I assume it's probably one of the TARDISes.
Mm-hmm.
But then he also gets her.
Yeah,
He gets her a job at the Time Hotel as well.
which is the best thing he could give her outside of actually bringing her in the TARDIS.
Yeah,
And I hope we see her again at some point.
yeah. They can do Big Finish with her.
Oh, that'd be fun. That'd be fun.
I think Big Finish would have fun with the Time Hotel. You could probably tell fun
There's a lot
stories
of
with that.
stories you could tell with it. Yeah, there's a lot of fun stories you could tell with it. Even if it's just like, oh, look, Riversong checked into the Time Hotel, and I don't know, one or two of the people here ended up her temporary companions. Like, there's a lot of fun you could do with it.
Yeah.
Also, because we haven't mentioned him at all, poor Trev.
Oh yeah. I loved
That
Trev. He
poor
was so
guy.
good.
Trev was great. Did not deserve the fate that he had, but
Yeah.
ended up being kind of partially the hero. But
Yeah.
this somewhat insecure guy, this poor guy.
Yeah, we don't hear anything about him, but we know he's very clearly insecure and needs something to do.
Mm-hmm.
And he's one of the few actors I recognized because he was in Our Flag Means Death, which is a pirate show that I watched.
Okay, that's fun. I mean, we know that the actress for Joy is also fairly big right now too. So.
Yeah, she was in Barbie with Shooty before.
Oh, okay.
So
So they
they-
even knew each other from
yeah.
that. That's funny.
And in behind the scenes, they were like good friends very
Oh, that's
quickly.
good.
They
That's
enjoyed
good.
working together.
And I know Doctor Who was new for her. Like, she wasn't really like into any of it, so it was a big learning experience for her.
Yeah. She's mainly on Bridgerton right now, is her
Mhm.
her big thing, though.
Yeah,
Which Doctor Who did a parody of.
it did. I got one last thing about Joy to the World I want to say, and it's the CG, like the visuals. I think it was like really top notch, and I think it's because it's a Christmas special, so it has a budget separate from like a whole season.
Yeah.
But like the dinosaur looked really good, for example. All the different like the set designs, like all the different rooms they were in looked really good. I imagine a lot of things were actually green screened and CG and whatnot, especially since I remember the behind the scenes video they talked about how like you can't actually like get a hotel for filming.
Yeah.
Because you either have to take like if you do, it's like a floor of a hotel and you have to rent out the entire floor.
Yeah.
You cannot get a lobby because you cannot be in control of anybody coming or going from the hotel.
Yeah, so
So
it was all just sets that they were working on.
mhm.
I think like the outside of the hotel was real, and then
Yeah.
the inside was a set.
I think so. Yeah.
And then
But I definitely think
when
they did good with it all.
when the Doctor was on top of the train, they actually had like a thing he was standing on.
Oh, okay, that's fun.
There's like a top part of a train they just had him stand on and do a
Yeah.
lasso thing.
That was a fun scene too.
Yeah. But yeah, I enjoyed that episode for the most part, but I thought that like the star seed is actually good. Could have been seeded earlier, not just like
Yeah,
right at the end. It's just it's actually fine.
yeah. I think it would have helped to have the Doctor talk about how, like, the star seed, the idea of a new star being born. That's not bad. It's bad that it's going to happen somewhere in Earth's history on Earth.
Yeah,
I kind of wish the whole thing for the Doctor was stop it from blowing up soon, and or we gotta move it somewhere, like a little bit more.
yeah,
I think he even mentioned using the TARDIS at one point to, like, relocate it, but
yeah,
I wish they leaned a little bit more into that because the Doctor was treating it as like the whole thing was a threat a little too much.
yeah.
But yeah, because it's like the beauty of a new star. Like, there, I think the Doctor should have said and done a little bit more with that instead of just Joy being the one to kind of say it to him.
Yeah, definitely would have
But
been
yeah.
a bit nicer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I
Agreed.
found the line of the Doctor saying it's mansplain central whenever the Doctor's in the room. I found that so funny.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. That's pretty accurate.
Yep.
But after Joy to the World, we then got our little trailer for season 2 for our first look at the new season. And we're not going to go like full analysis mode here or anything like that. We've also been going for a while already.
Yeah.
But like, how are we feeling impressions wise from our first look at it?
I feel like it doesn't really tell us that much other than just like there's going to be a major threat in this story.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't really get
So
the biggest idea of what's going to actually happen in this season.
so there's like, I'll say 3, but I'm not sure if that number's final. There's like 3 things that I do think are worth talking about from this. One, we see Mrs. Flood.
Yeah.
We see Mrs. Flood. She's got like opera glasses on, so we see she's actively starting to do something. I don't know what.
I kind of wonder
Um,
if maybe she's in the same theater where the cartoon comes to life,
yeah, I was
and
thinking
she's
that
the one that
too.
does it.
I was thinking that too, which would really play into the idea of like the god of stories or whatever it is that like like a lot of us are starting to think that she is
Yeah.
based on last season. Um, my problem with that though is I feel like Mrs. Flood is going to be something that's season finale kind of a threat
Yeah.
because of how much they're setting her up, and the animation problem, which is definitely some other kind of god. That feels like it would take the slot of like Maestro in this past
Yeah.
season.
That could
It
be it.
feels like it'd be an earlier threat to introduce the new companion, Belinda, to the threat of the gods.
Yeah. That could be the case.
Um, we do know that theater problem is tied to a god because I remember there was like filming, like some of the earliest filming for season 2 was outside of a theater in I think like the 1950s or something like that, and the up top literally spells out like now playing Harbinger.
Oh yeah.
So we know we're dealing with gods again.
Yeah. And also,
um,
I don't know if you saw
mhm.
it, but there was also a Doctor Who Unleashed for the Christmas special, and they did show off like a clip of season 2. So
Oh, I didn't get to see that.
basically, all it tells us is that Belinda is from present day Earth, and
Ah.
she works at a hospital. So people are like, oh, she's basically
Oh,
Martha.
okay.
Pe- People are thinking she's
Huh.
basically Martha, but I mean, we don't know anything about like her personality or anything.
Yeah, having a similar background does not mean she's gonna
It's just
fit the
a short
same
clip
role.
where like someone tells her like, "Hey, Belinda, a doctor's here for you." As she's walking out the door, it's like, "Yeah, tell him to talk to me later." And then the doctor's in the room, and he like hacks into the computer to try to get somebody's name or something.
Hmm. Okay,
And then it's just very
interesting.
short. It basically just tells us that she's from present day Earth.
Mm-hmm. We'll see how. Yeah, we'll see how they meet and what goes on.
Yeah,
Um, we do know from the trailer that she's stuck traveling with him,
yeah. He's trying to get her home
which
and can't do it.
So we're going back to a classic idea here,
Yeah.
and I do love that. I do love that because I think it's immediately going to give us a different kind of companion dynamic than what we have at Ruby. Because there's going to need to be trust out of necessity, and there's going to be that development into friendship because they're not traveling because they want to.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting, different dynamic here. And then
Mm-hmm.
we do briefly see Ruby, and she's with Unit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So she's
Yep.
basically Martha.
Yeah. Well, I guess I think that's just kind of what they're going for with Unit at this point. I think Unit's going to be the way we keep seeing any companion return is going to be through Unit.
Yeah,
And
probably.
yes, we had that originally with Martha, but I think now that's going to be even more so the case. I'm more so disappointed that they still haven't done that opportunity with Yaz yet, though.
Yeah.
Like just even just a cameo, even just a reference to the fact that she's there with them. Put Yaz in Unit. Like she's like the most deserving of like appearing there in the same degree as all these other classic companions have been.
I think it would be funny to see Yaz meeting the Doctor, and the Doctor's now a man, and she's like,
Mm-hmm.
you're the one that made me realize I was a lesbian, and now you're a man. That'd be
Well,
very
this
funny.
complicates things.
I think Russell T Davis would have fun
But
writing a scene like that.
I do think he would have fun with that, which is kind of why I want it to happen.
Yeah.
But so clearly, there's some sort of threat that comes to Unit as well. Probably another god of some sorts. Um, I'm really interested in seeing Belinda as a character and how her dynamic with the Doctor is. We don't have a
Yeah.
date for this season yet, unfortunately. It still says 2025. Shocker. I feel like it'll be earlier than season one was, though. I don't think it's going to be all the way out in May. I feel like it
Yeah.
might be like March or April.
It definitely has to be early because obviously we're getting the war between the land and the sea in later 2024, 2025. So
That's true. That's
unless
true. If
they're
you balance it out,
like it has to be early because they're not going to put them up at the same time.
yeah. If you run, let's say you run season two, it's like 8 episodes again, I think. So let's say you run it through all of April and all of May, and then you do War Between Land and Sea in like August and September or something, which then still gives a decent amount of time before Christmas or
Yeah.
whatever holiday thing they're doing, if they're doing it. I don't think we know anything about the next Christmas special yet.
Yeah, I don't think we know if they filmed one for this year.
Well, in this next year, but
I think they're kind of like it would probably be produced with a theoretical season 3 if
yeah,
we get one.
we better.
Because I know
All right.
they people were saying that they kind of leave season 2 open ended towards the end, so that like theoretically you could regenerate the Doctor afterwards. So that kind of tells me that
Hope
like
not.
it's probably that they would then film a Christmas special where he would either regenerate or not. So like there's no hanging plot threads they have to resolve with this Doctor.
I see. I see.
So it's probably like if they get the go ahead for season 3, then they would film a Christmas special either with the Doctor regenerating or not, depending on what shoot he wants to do.
Oh, I hope he sticks around for at least another season.
Yeah. At this point, we're
I
just
hope
wondering
so.
if we're getting another season.
I think we will. It's just a matter of will it be through Disney or not.
Yeah. It might be
'Cause if
like,
not, it'll just take longer.
yeah. It might be we get a 2026 Christmas special and then a new season in 2027 if it doesn't get
Oh
Disney
God.
money.
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah. That'll be some time. Well, I think that covers it for news.
Yeah.
Looking ahead a bit, unless there's anything else. So at this point,
I mean, technically,
oh yeah, go
the
ahead.
the War Games in color did release, so
Yes, yes,
that
it
came
did.
out.
Which means when it reaches time for us to actually get to the War Games, hopefully we'll get to watch that version as
Yeah.
well.
I know they did announce a Blu-ray, but currently it's only in. I've only seen it for like in Britain. I don't know if we have an American version of that yet. It also didn't have a release date when I was looking at it either. So
Hopefully it will by the time we get to it.
yeah, yeah. I think that's all we have to say for this time.
Yeah, I think so.
I guess I am wondering if season 2 is going to play into. There's a thing called the Land of Fiction from the Second Doctor era, which would be like if the Doctor can't get Belinda back home, that implies that maybe they're not in our universe or something. So maybe they get transported to the Land of Fiction,
Oh.
and maybe that's what happens.
That would be why you can't get her back. That's why the animation thing happens.
Yeah, and then obviously the God of Stories would have strong powers in that world.
It's true, and if you have, and if you do have Mrs. Flood as the, the god of fiction, or the one ruling the land of fiction, you could do so much
Yeah.
with that, because that's like its own little universe. You
And-
can have anything fictional come to life there. You can have the Doctor encounter Doctor Who as a TV series in there,
Yeah.
and get like really meta and weird with it.
And obviously, Russell Tate Davis brought back Sutex, so he could easily bring back a second Doctor concept.
Yep. Yep. Oh, that's a great idea. Now I'm excited for when we get to that with the second Doctor.
Yeah.
And we get to see like how that might play into it. Oh, that's
I-
gonna be great.
and
That's gonna be great.
I think that episode is the one that has a Tales of the TARDIS as well in the second Doctor era.
Ooh.
So that's when we'll
Very
see
good.
older Jamie and Zoe.
We're a bit of a ways away from that though. Because
Yeah.
that's not part of our next episode.
Yeah.
Our next episode I will toss over to you, but thankfully it's I think more accessible
Yeah,
than some other ones have been.
for the most part. We're watching The Abominable Snowmen and The Ice Warriors. So The Abominable Snowmen is six-parters. It's a six-parter. It's fully animated. There is technically also, I think, episode 2 is also survives in its original form. But like the animated version, you'll be able to find easily on Tubi TV and everywhere else. The Abominable Snowman is the introduction to the Great Intelligence, I will say. So we'll be meeting him. I think the idea is that like the 11th Doctor Snowman episode is supposed to take place before this in his timeline. Because
Yeah.
that's in like Victorian times and this is in the 1900s. So it's supposed to be like between that episode and the rest of season or series 7B idea. I think it's supposed to be in between all that.
If I remember correctly, the lore behind it is the Great Intelligence was in Matt Smith's Christmas episode, The Snowman, and then was in modern day as he kind of like really became the Great Intelligence, and then when everything happened with the Doctor's timeline and Clara and all that, he then like this is like what remained of him basically.
Yeah, that
to
might
then
be the
set up
case.
all this. I think that's what it was.
I know
It's been a while since I looked.
I know he has a
that.
story. I think it's not this one, but like a sequel that we get later where he's in the London Underground and they seed that idea in the 11th Doctor Snowman episode where he has like the lunchbox with the London Underground that tells the Great Intelligence
yeah.
that like the London Underground is an important part of the Earth's history or something like that.
Yep.
But yeah, and then also The Ice Warriors is also 6 episodes long. This one is, I think episodes 2 and 3 are animated, and then the rest are their original surviving ones. So that one's not on Tubi TV, but yeah.
Okay.
And then obviously,
I see.
it's the Ice Warriors, so we're getting introduced to the Ice Warriors.
Yeah, that's gonna be good. Also, shout out to the fact that the entirety of Tomb of the Cybermen was not animated; it was live action, and we really got like all the character performances as intended, and it was very good.
Yeah, it's definitely nice seeing them. Like Patrick Troughton, especially, it's nice just seeing like his facial expressions and stuff like that.
Yep. No, it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, at this point, obviously, if you support us on Patreon for even $1 a month, you can get access to these episodes early. And if you support us at $5 a month, or our companion tier, you can watch us live as we record. And there'll be a little live text chat on the side. So if you want to tell us Tomb of the Cybermen was great, but Joy to the World was the worst Christmas special ever, and you're not looking forward to the Ice Warriors, I don't know. You can tell us that right on the side, and we can actively talk about that. But otherwise, as a reminder, make sure to watch The Abominable Snowmen and The Ice Warriors before our next episode. You can find those on BBC iPlayer or Tubi TV or other locations for The Ice Warriors not being on Tubi TV.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I have been Tris. You can find me on social media at ToonTris.
And I've been Joy. You can find me at Joy Content.
And we will see you next time.
Bye.